Chapter 16. Shattered Dreamscape. A hush settled over the ruin of the industrial complex as dawn turned the sky an ashen grey. Smoke curled in wisps from the collapsed remains of the Nexus engine. Here and there, sparks flickered among twisted wreckage, still crackling with residual dream energy. Sirens had long since faded. Either the regime had pulled back to reevaluate, or the Watchers had gone too far underground for pursuit to matter in this moment. Either way, the air tasted of scorched metal and Pyrrhic victory. Selene coughed against the acrid smell, forcing her feet forward in slow, pained steps. Her vision still swam from the chaotic flight after the engine's destruction. She and the remaining Watchers had scattered, reassembling hours later in a makeshift hideout amid the city's labyrinth of decrepit buildings. A few Watchers dozed in exhaustion, while others paced, waiting for word on who had survived. Through the fractured windows, the city's lights glimmered under low-hanging clouds. She found Draven, leaning against a blackened support column in what once might have been an office. The overhead lights flickered weakly, half the bulbs blown during the sabotage. He clutched his side, a make-do bandage damp with blood though he wore a stoic mask. When he caught sight of Selene, he nodded. "We hit the engine," he murmured, voice hoarse, "but the city feels no different yet." Selene swallowed. It's only been hours. Maybe the effect hasn't set in. Yet a part of her worried the sabotage might not be total. The regime's technology was advanced, and she'd barely begun to master Oneiric Fusion. Could the Nexus engine be repaired? Across the small room, Ethan crouched beside Ava, who lay on a patch of tattered blankets. She'd taken a nasty fall during the retreat. Her leg wound festered, and her empathic powers were in disarray, random bursts of others' pain flooding her mind. The Watchers had done what they could, but frustration lined Ethan's brow as he pressed a fresh bandage against Ava's injury. "We can't stay," Draven continued, drawing Selene's attention back. "If the regime picks up our scent, they'll retaliate. Hard." His eyes flicked to the corridor behind them. "But we have to rest, at least briefly, or we'll lose more people." Selene wanted to argue, "We can't possibly move yet. Ava's in no condition." But the grim reality pressed in. Even battered, they had to be ready to vanish again. Her illusions could only do so much, especially if the regime's disruptors were still in play. With nowhere else to gather, the Watchers set up a rudimentary command post in the building's deserted lobby. Once elegant marble floors lay cracked and stained, reflecting the dim glow of battery-powered lanterns. At a taped-together table, Draven examined a salvaged console that flickered with low battery warnings. Victor, recently arrived after hearing of the sabotage, typed furiously, trying to glean any new intel from the city's networks. Selene stood behind them, arms folded. Her back ached, and bruises from the raid twinged with each breath. The exhaustion went deeper than physical, though. It swirled in her chest, a nagging sense of hopelessness, nibbling at the edges of her resolve. Suddenly, Victor stiffened. "I'm picking up partial chatter," he announced. "Encrypted channels. They're discussing recovery operations at the facility. Could be they're sending an engineering team to salvage what's left of the engine." Ethan, lingering at the doorway, scowled. "So they haven't given up. If they can repair the engine, this was all for nothing." A heavy silence descended, Watchers exchanging looks of dread. Selene's hands tightened into fists. "There must be a way to ensure they can't rebuild," she said quietly, half to herself. She remembered the swirl of dream energy she'd forced into the engine's framework, how it had begun to unravel from within. Could she do more, or was it too late? At that, Draven rubbed his temples, each word weighted. "The dream realm remains in flux after your sabotage, Selene. I fear the boundary between illusions and reality is frayed, not just for the engine, but for all of us." She met his gaze, alarm prickling her skin. "Frayed?" He nodded, voice solemn. Several Watchers reported nightmares bleeding into their waking moments since the sabotage, glimpses of illusions forming without conscious intent. If the engine's meltdown triggered a wider rift, it could threaten Dreamweavers across the city. A chill crawled along Selene's spine. She'd noticed her illusions flickering involuntarily since the raid, like stray wisps manifesting at the edges of her vision. Now she realized it wasn't just exhaustion or fear. Something deeper had cracked in the dreamscape. Later, in a dim corner where a makeshift curtain offered a sliver of privacy, Selene tried to rest. Sleep eluded her. Every time her eyes closed, a swirl of color and broken shapes beckoned, visions of the dream realm she couldn't tame. She finally rose, deciding she'd rather wander the building's silent halls than face unending nightmares. She found Ava there, hobbling along on a makeshift crutch. Despite her injury, the empath had refused to remain idle. At Selene's approach, Ava paused, leaning against a chipped pillar. "You should be resting," Selene said gently, though she knew the futility of the advice. Ava's eyes carried shadows. "I feel the Watcher's fear, their unraveling hopes. Staying still, it hurts more." She swallowed, gaze flicking to Selene. "You've felt it too, haven't you? Like the dream realms splintering." Selene nodded, hugging herself. "Yes, it's as if illusions form on their own, fleeting and dangerous." She glanced down the hallway, half expecting shapes to shift at the corners of her sight. "I'm worried," Ava murmured. "If the Watchers can't control these erratic illusions, the city might descend into chaos, real nightmares seeping into daily life, and the regime will blame us." Selene's heart thumped in agreement. If mass panic erupted, the government could justify any crackdown. She closed her eyes, remembering the fleeting vision of her parents in the dream realm. Perhaps the meltdown had unmoored more than just technology. It had shaken the foundational lines of dream and waking. By sunrise, the Watchers forced themselves into a strategy session. This time, the mood was heavier than usual. Ethan conferred with Draven at the table. Victor hovered over the sputtering console, and Ava sat close, her leg propped as she tried to quell the emotional dissonance flooding in from the Watchers. Selene stood near a grimy window, arms wrapped tight to ward off the damp cold. She could hear the faint hum of city traffic, a reminder that normal life carried on for those oblivious to the Watchers' plight. Finally, Draven called the group's attention. "We have 2 emergencies. 1. The regime might salvage the Nexus engine if we don't hinder their operations. 2. The dreamscape instability is intensifying. We risk illusions spilling uncontrollably into reality." A hush fell. One of the Watchers, face gaunt from sleepless nights, asked, "Which crisis do we handle first?" Draven's shoulders slumped. "We have to manage both. If the regime repairs the engine, they'll clamp down on any dream anomaly and we'll be powerless. Meanwhile, these rogue illusions could destroy our credibility, and maybe the city's sanity, if they aren't contained." Ava's voice was a husk of strain. "Is there a way to stabilize the dream realm? Selene, you've touched it more deeply than any of us." Selene met her searching gaze, throat constricting. She remembered the meltdown, how she'd forced dream energy into the engine's code, the sense of near limitless power on the brink of unraveling. "Could I anchor the dream realm somehow?" "I don't know," she admitted softly. "Maybe if we found the place where the boundary is weakest, or if we used Oneiric Fusion in a controlled environment. I'm not sure." Her chest tightened with guilt at the Watchers' expectant faces. They wanted her to fix what the meltdown had broken, but she barely had a handle on her own illusions. Ethan's hand brushed her arm. "We'll figure it out together. We just need to keep them from sealing off the dream realm entirely, or turning it into a prison." The Watchers dispersed, each weighed by the twin crises. Some ventured out to glean intelligence on the regime's salvage operations. Others tried to calm frightened citizens who were seeing illusions bleed through their every waking moment. Selene remained in that decrepit apartment building, pacing a graffiti-strewn corridor, wanting so badly to help, but not sure how. Her illusions flickered at the edges of her vision, half-formed shapes dancing against the dingy walls. She pressed a hand to her temple, forcing them away. A memory of the dream meltdown rose, swirling energies, the sense of unstoppable force. Then that force had shattered, and reality was left in splinters. If this is my fault, then I have to fix it. At last, she made a decision. She found Ava and Draven by a broken window, discussing logistical concerns. "I'm going to try something," she said, voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. "To locate the place where the boundary bleeds. To see if I can fuse it back together, even a little." Draven's eyes widened, flicking to Ava as though in silent inquiry. Ava gave a slight nod. "If you think it might help, but you can't go alone." Selene squared her shoulders. "I'll take who I can trust," she said, voice firmer than she felt. The unspoken reference to the traitor loomed between them. Draven offered to accompany her, but she shook her head. "We need you here to coordinate. Let Ethan come. He's linked to my illusions in a way. If it goes wrong, he can pull me out." Ava glanced away, evidently fighting the weight of her empathy, but she murmured, "All right. Just be careful." Selene nodded, gripping a shred of hope. The Watchers needed a new foothold after so many illusions were shattered by sabotage and meltdown. Perhaps by facing the fractured dreamscape itself, she could piece together a path forward. A storm still churned inside her, an ache of guilt and determination, an echo of her Oneiric Fusion, waiting to be unleashed in a world that was crumbling at the seams. She pulled her jacket tighter, steeling herself for the venture. In a city haunted by nightmares half-born, she would walk into the heart of the dream realm again. This time, she vowed, I'll harness the fury before it tears us all apart. And maybe, just maybe, that would keep the Watchers and the dream realm alive a little longer.